So we are now applying our swabs. This is the stage that we call the actual dressing. You're coming to dress the wound nicely. And you look at the size of your wound, and then you divide your swab, or you arrange the swab nicely. Please, this should not be done on the patient or directly on the wound. It can be very painful. So the arrangement is done nicely. Immerse in the solution for the dressing halfway, and as you squeeze, the entire gauze becomes wet. Avoid dressing or ironing on the wound. Just gauge, look at the size of the wound, and then you place your gauze. Then the wound is covered again with a second layer of gauze, and this one is a dry one. The layers of gauze will depend on whether the wound is a clean one or a discharging one. If the wound is discharging, then we need more layers of gauze. We are almost through with our wound dressing. We now have to apply adhesive tape or plaster or a bandage. So we've now applied sufficient dressing to the wound, and we need to secure it in position using a plaster. My assistant is supposed to help me out with this. So we are now done with our wound dressing. Thank you very much, Mr. Osei. The wound is healing gradually. Now there are no discharges. So don't worry, very soon you go home. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Would you like to lie or be in the position in which you are, or you want to sit upright? Ensure the comfortability of your patient. Don't impose anything on your patient. After the dressing, you remove your Macintosh and towel. Remove your screen. We mentioned earlier that will provide privacy. Ensure your patient is comfortable. And then the trolley is discarded. Now, how do we do this? We are going to decontaminate our instruments in a chlorine solution. If it's 0.5, example 0.5 chlorine solution, the instruments are going to be in this solution for about 10 minutes, after which they are rinsed, and then they are also washed, dried, and then packaged for sterilization. Now, if the wound is to be irrigated, then we would have needed a syringe and then an irrigation solution, so that before the wound is dressed or cleaned, irrigation is done, a bowl or a receiver is placed under the site of the wound, and the wound is flushed with normal saline or any sterile solution. After which the wound is cleaned, and then it is also dry. or dressed. Now, if the wound is very deep, we would do packing. And the packing is done by introducing a probe into the wound to know the depth of the wound, how deep we'll be able to pack, after which a sinus forceps is used in packing. A piece of gauze is soaked in the dressing solution, and then the wound is packed so that the wound in deeper structures will also get access to healing. If the wound is a septic wound with a lot of slough, substances like pawpaw pulp, honey, or granulated sugar is used in dressing the wound. This helps in softening the slough on the wound, and then it also attracts the microorganism in the wound to the surface so that they can easily be gotten rid of during wound dressing. If pawpaw pulp or honey is to be used, then we need an extra sterile gallipot. With the pawpaw pulp, ripe pawpaw is used, the seeds are removed, and then with your sterile gloved hand, a sterile thumb blade or spatula is used in preparing something like a cream. And this is spread on a piece of gauze. So after your first layer of gauze, this second layer of gauze with the pawpaw pulp or honey is placed on the wound before you put your dry gauze. Remember that the pawpaw pulp or honey is not directly placed on the wound. There should be one layer of gauze, and the second layer will contain the pawpaw pulp, granulated sugar, or honey. The wound is dressed as we did for the first time. We apply extra gauze and then apply plaster or bandage to the wound. Bandaging is a process of applying a piece of material around a limb or a part of the body. We have different sizes and types of bandages. We may have the roller bandage, that is the commonest type we all know. We also have the T bandage. We have the triangular bandage, which is used for slings. We have different types and styles of bandaging. We may have the simple spiral. It will be demonstrated. We also have the reverse spiral. We have the recurrent fashion, and then we also have the figure of 8. All these types will depend on the part of the body being bandaged. The bandages come in different sizes, and they are used according to the parts of the body being bandaged. For instance, if the head is being bandaged, then we will need a 2-inch bandage. For fingers, we also need a 2-inch. Then when you come to the chest or the trunk, we need 4 to 6 inches. Then when we come to the hand, we need 2 to 3 inch, and then 3 to 4 for the lower limbs. Okay. So we want to demonstrate the various types and styles of bandaging. As part of the rules of bandaging, we are supposed to stand in front of the patient, and then you roll a few inches or centimeters of the bandage. Now the head roll, or the head of the roll, it means the bundle or the roll is supposed to face upwards and not downwards. And then the bandaging is done from the lower parts of the body to the upper parts. So we want to start with the circular one, the first one, which is the circular type of bandaging. This is the simplest type. So with a few centimeters of the bandage rolled, you apply the bandage. You need a first round turn, and because this is the circular fashion, we are going to apply the bandage round without leaving any space until the entire bandage is finished. So the circular fashion is the simplest fashion, and this is the demonstration. The bandage is rolled or applied around the limb in a circular fashion or order, and the bandage should be firm but not too tight to impede circulation to the patient's limb. This is very simple and the simplest of all the types of bandaging. Now, after you are done with the bandaging, you secure the bandage with a plaster or an adhesive strapping or a safety pin. So that is circular fashion of bandaging, and is the simplest type of bandaging. Now we want to move on to the simple but spiral. And with this type, it's still the circular fashion, but you leave about a third of the preceding turn. So with the simple spiral, again in the same fashion, a few centimeters of the bandage is rolled, drum faces upwards, and you go around the patient's limb or part of the body once, and a third of the preceding turn is left. So at the end of the day, you have a spiral fashion. And because nursing is an art, it's better to vary the styles of bandaging instead of using the simple spiral. So this is the spiral fashion we are expecting to have after the bandaging. Both styles serve the same purposes, but we want it to be attractive. That is why we normally adopt the simple spiral fashion. So that is the simple spiral. Now the third style of bandaging is a reverse spiral. To the reverse spiral or spiral reverse style or fashion of bandaging. Anytime we are bandaging, no matter what the style of bandaging you are using, you are supposed to do a circular turn first before you proceed. So with the reverse spiral, as we come back to do the spiral turn, the bandage is twisted to the side of the patient's limb. This type of style of bandaging helps in giving a firm pressure to the sides being bandaged. So as you come to the side, you turn the bandage or you twist the bandage instead of going in straight. The bandage is turned and we leave a third or 2/3 as we did in simple spiral. So that is the reverse spiral. Reverse because when we get to the side, we twist as if we are going back and the bandage is applied. So the pattern will be seen at the side of the patient's limb. Make sure it is firm and you should cover the preceding turn so that no space is left in between the bandages or the turns. Now the last portion or part of the bandage is now taken round as we started and then secured at the side of the patient's limb. So we have the reverse spiral. So the reverse is what we are seeing on the patient's limb. We now come to another interesting one, and that is the figure of 8 bandaging. So we now come to the figure of 8 style of bandaging. This is normally done for stumps, amputated limbs. It's also done at the joint, and it makes dressing very firm and secured. So this is the figure of 8 style of bandaging. Again, we'll go around the side to be bandaged, and then we are now making the figure of 8 by just crisscrossing in turns, and at the end of the day we have a nice figure like 8. So that is the 8 we are seeing. It should either be in the center or at the side of the patient's limb. So this crisscrossing design or pattern we are seeing is what we refer to as the figure of 8. And the last part of the bandage is applied in a circular fashion and secured at the side of the patient. So the pattern we are seeing is the 8, and that gives it the name, the figure of 8 bandaging. But if it's a stump, you start by applying the bandage vertically, then you now go around to secure the first part of the bandage, and then subsequently you crisscross the bandage by starting from below and then upwards in that fashion. The figure of 8 style can also be done around a joint. The patient's joint is supposed to be bent, otherwise after the bandaging the arm becomes immovable and stiff. So the joint is slightly flexed, and as we stated when we're looking at rules for bandaging, we start from the lower to the upper part of the body. So that is the figure of 8 style of bandaging, and it's being applied this time to the joint and not a stump, but in the same fashion. So you realize that the 8 is at the side of the patient's limb. And that gives it the name, the figure of 8. And then finally the bandage is secured and in a circular fashion. So this pattern is the 8 we are talking about. So patient's limb can be moved without being restricted by the bandage. Now we have another fashion of bandaging, which is normally applied to the head, and that is a recurrent type of bandaging. For patients with head injury, where we have to secure a dressing on the head with a bandage, that style of bandaging is also used. So Mr. Osei has a wound, and we want to bandage using the recurrent style of bandaging. With this type, again, the drum faces upwards. We are using a 2-inch bandage, which we said earlier that is normally used for the patient's head, and we want to secure this dressing in position. So we start by placing the bandage in the center of the head, and then it is brought forward again. So that is a recurrent. It goes back and then comes forward. This is a dummy, so I have to manage because it is slippery. So it goes back and forth. So this style or pattern you are seeing is a recurrent turns. You cover the entire head until you finish with the turns, and then you now go around the patient's head to secure the bandage. And the dressing in position. Making sure the patient's eye is not covered. It is then secured with a plaster. So the recurrent turn is the back and forth movement of the bandage. And again, with the head, if we want to support the esophageal jaw like our patient here, we also have the T style of bandaging. Ideally, a T bandage is supposed to be used, but we can also use the roller bandage. With this, the bandage is rolled and it is placed, the center of the bandage is placed under the patient's chin. Then we make a crisscross turn at one side. So we need a shorter bandage, and the second one is also placed at the other side of the head. And this is called barrel bandaging. This bandage is too long for that style of bandaging. So we have barrel bandaging. Okay, thank you. So we've been looking at the different styles of bandaging. We have the circular, which is the simplest style, or style in which the bandage is encircled around the limb or the affected limb. We also have the simple spiral. It is also encircled, but then a third of the preceding turn is left. The third fashion or style is also the reverse spiral, and the reverse spiral is just like the simple spiral because a third of the preceding turn is left, but then it is twisted at the side, and then the bandage is turned over the limb, and hence its name, the reverse spiral. Then we also have the figure of 8 bandaging, normally done for stumps. joints, and then the elbow. And with that one, the bandage is held in the same way as the other types, but after the first circular turn, the subsequent turns are done in a crisscross fashion. The bandage passes over and under the patient's limb, giving you a nice 8 shape or style, and hence the name figure of 8, the number 8. Then we also have the recurrent style, normally for bandaging the head to secure dressings in position or patients with head injury. And then we have the barrel bandaging, which is made in the form of a T, and it started from the jaw, twisted at the side, and tied at the other side of the patient's body. There are other styles. All parts of the body can be bandaged: the fingers, the ankle, the chest, the back, and all parts of the body. But depending on patient's condition, we may have others like the many-tail bandage for securing broken ribs and other parts of the back. And we have different styles according to or depending on the type of fracture, the type of wound sustained, the part of the body being bandaged. Thank you.